All right, hey, what's up, guys? This is Nanners from Toostupidgamerz, and I'm here with Jeff Brennan.
How you doing?
That's right, and Jeff is an artist illustrator, is exhibiting currently at Derpycon. Could not help but notice all of the wonderful Courage the Cowardly Dog art, so I had to stop by. We want to ask him a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yep, no problem.
First off, can you tell us about the different series that you've worked on in the past?
Oh, it's been quite a few. The first one I did was a show called The Toysters, which you definitely haven't heard of. It was like a small factory in Brooklyn. We got paid with like a $5 bills, like an envelope full of $5 bills. Might have been mob money, I don't know. And then from there I moved out to LA. I worked on Jumanji. What else did I do? Like a bunch of different shows. I gotta look at them. Oh, Extreme Ghostbusters, Dragon Tales. And then when I moved back to New York, I ended up working on Courage. I actually worked on the pilot first before I went to LA, and then when we came back, it was made into a series, and I worked on that. That was done in Manhattan.
Now, some of your work has appeared on the Big Bang Theory. So can you tell us about what it was like to get some of your work referenced onto that series?
That's actually a great story because a lot of people want to know how I did that. My mom was like just a big fan of the show, so she literally sent like through the mail my artwork to them and said, "You guys should be putting my son's artwork on the show." And then they called me up, they sent me the contract, and then they started doing it. I did it from seasons 8 to season 12, and my comic book Girl Leeta was actually one of the things that was featured right next to Sheldon, the main character of the show, and that was really good for sales. And now I've got the trade paperback of Girl Leeta's on Amazon, and I'm up to issue 8 now, and it's selling really well because of that. And the first time I saw it, like I knew they bought my artwork from me, but I didn't know where it was going to be. I was so surprised like how big it was in the frame, like it really was featured prominently.
And you can see some examples of that shot in the background as well, which we'll overlay in post. You've also done work on a Simpsons comic. Can you tell us what it's like to do work for a property as big as The Simpsons?
Well, they're really picky. They were very, like, I didn't do a lot of Simpsons work. I did like just the one comic, and they're very specific. Like if the pupils are too big or if the eyeballs are too big, there's got to be 9 points of hair on Bart. It's like a lot of stuff like that, and they'll let you know if you get it wrong, for sure. But I mean, I enjoyed it because I'm a big Simpsons fan, but it's very exacting work, though.
A random question, do you know why The Simpsons are yellow?
I heard it was because they draw attention more. Like if you're flipping through the channels and you see yellow people, you stop. Is that what you've heard too?
That, and also that they want to make you think that there's something wrong with your TV, so you'll adjust your set.
I didn't hear that one before. Cool.
Speaking of colors, of course, Courage the Cowardly Dog is again why we had stopped by here. Is just such a huge fan of the show. Is, in my opinion, the best cartoon dog. Do you have any reason why you think that Courage is pink? Any other reason?
It's funny because when we were working on the show, there was no colors yet. I thought he was brown. When I was working on the show the whole time, I thought he was brown. And then when the show actually started airing, it was pink, and I was like, same thing. I was like, why is he pink? I had no idea.
I guess it just adds to the kind of weirdness of it.
He's purple when he goes outside, too.
True. Over here on the table, you have several actual storyboards, and some of them aren't for Courage as well. So when you're working on Courage, were you also doing some of the storyboarding, or are you just doing the illustrations?
Well, that was part of my job. John did a lot of the storyboards, but I did some of the storyboards for some of the shows. I also did some of the character designs, some of the prop designs, and animation on the pilot.
And I think a lot of people agree with me when I say this, but Courage is very intertwined with dark, like horror aesthetic. Would you say that you were a big fan of horror before you started working on the show?
I probably became a bigger fan after working on the show. I was always more of a sci-fi fan, but I enjoyed it. Like it's one of those shows, like when I watch it, I do enjoy watching it. Some of the shows that I've worked on, I don't enjoy as much, but that's one that I do enjoy, though. So
that's cool. It's cool to hear always as someone that worked on the design is actually in tune with the show, enjoys the show as well. Was there any particular like favorite scene that you have from the show?
Well, I kind of like the one with the goose that fell in love with the truck, because I did a lot of the design work on the goose and on his castle and then his vehicle that he rode around in. So that's probably one of the ones I like the most.
And are there any other kind of characters or parts of the show that really stand out to you that you did work on designing?
Well, I worked on the Return the Slab episode, but I did more like backgrounds and props, so I didn't design the character himself. But I know that's like a really memorable one that people like.
So the reason I bring up horror, of course, obviously the show has those themes, but I feel like for a lot of us kids that grew up watching the show, it got us kind of more familiar with that aesthetic, more used to horror. Would you say that, what would you say mentally prepared you to work on a show that's so iconically dark and like tonally more of like a kind of horror macabre show like Courage?
Well, it's funny, when I was working on it, that kind of stuff didn't really occur to me, because we do like a lot. I mean, I used to do like a lot of different shows, and every show you do, there's like a style guide of like, you have to match the look. Like, for example, like when I was doing the Simpsons comic book, there's like a look you have to have. When I was doing Dragon Tales, there's a different look, you know, so we were just kind of given the style guides and told to match it. So it wasn't really my design. Yeah, I mean, I designed some of the stuff, but it was designed within that framework of the show, you know. So
essentially, there was a framework for you to work off of.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Except for when I did the pilot, but that one, if you remember the pilot, there's not a lot in that one. It's just that the chicken from outer space and the farmer and Muriel, and that's about it.
Chickens from outer space.
Yeah, exactly.
And we had talked about this earlier. So you say that a lot of the times fans will come up to you, and when you're talking about Courage, they'll tell you that it was like a really scary show. Yeah. Do they often say that in like it was in a good way or like a bad way?
Both. Some people are like, somebody today came up and said, my mom wouldn't let me watch it, and I still don't want to watch it. She's actually scared by it. But then other people are like, oh, it really scared me, but I loved it, so I'd keep watching it, you know, so it's both.
And we're definitely going to not tell my mom about this interview, too.
Everybody's mom lets them watch Dragon Tales, though.
That's true. That is true, yeah. So when you were working on Courage the Cowardly Dog, and you were working on like a character, was it difficult to create some of those designs for when they're really like, the character has really exaggerated expressions, like when they're screaming or yelling or something?
Not really, because we would do, like, I would do like a design, and then a lot of times John Dilworth or one of the other people would kind of tweak it to make it fit the show a little bit better. So like, I don't have it with me, but like for example, that Goose character that I was talking about, like they took my design and like tweaked it and made it look more like it fit into that world a little bit, you know what I mean? So we had like a basic idea, but they kind of tweak it. It always goes that way in animation. Like somebody does the concept and then somebody does like the final.
Who would you say would be like in your book, like most significant illustrators, maybe people that you looked up to or inspired you?
That's easy for me. I'm a big fan of John Byrne, actually. For his X-Men, when I was a kid, I read that stuff, and I was like, I really want to do comics. And I did comics for a while, and I got into animation, and I also got into special effects on Expendables. So it's like, those are three like kind of major thing. Like for comics, it was definitely John Byrne. Animation, it was a show called Star Blazers. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It was Space Battleship Yamato in Japan. That was my animation influence. And then for special effects, it would be Star Wars. Star Wars really like opened a lot of people's minds, you know, seeing that. Just kind of blown away by the effects in that movie.
And I mean, I know it's a big question, but like, how did you get into animation?
Well, it's funny because my first job was on Superman comic book, and I did the backgrounds on that. And then there was a job at the place I mentioned where it was in the abandoned lipstick factory where we got paid in the $5 bills. They were looking for a background artist. So one of my friends had gotten work there, and they said, oh, this guy did backgrounds on Superman. So they thought I'd worked on the cartoons, but it was a comic book, but it was still kind of transferable enough. And then usually, once you get a job in animation, like somebody will leave and then they'll go work to another studio and they'll call you if you're, you know, friends with them, and they'll say, hey, you know, there's a job out here. Then one of my friends went out to LA, and then I went out to LA, and you just kind of, you know, bounce around the shows. And eventually, when I came back to New York, though, we kind of ran out when Courage ended, and that's when I ended up working in the toy industry at Fisher-Price. But, you know, it was a good decision because I was there 10 years, and a lot of animation stuff, you're only there for a couple of years. You don't know how long it's going to last, so... That's, I guess, I don't know if they answered it or not, but, you know, okay, yeah.
Is there, like, any particular challenges that really stand out to you as being in the animation industry?
Well, like I say, just the uncertainty of it, which is kind of why I don't really do it that much anymore. With my comic book, like, I kind of make my own hours. Like, I decide, I'm like the whole editorial department. I'm the writer, I'm the artist. With animation, sometimes, like, you're kind of, it's a lot of times there's like real tight deadlines, and then you might have like a few months where you're not working after you get everything done. So I mean, it's not ideal now, especially now that I have a house and a daughter and everything, and I'm not ready to move around as much as I used to. So yeah, so that's one thing, is a lot of moving and jumping from job to job. That's the one thing that, like, the downside of it for sure.
That does sound about right. I'm sure it's difficult with that uncertainty. But speaking of your comic, would you like to talk about your comic a little bit?
Yeah, it's her name is Girl Leeta, and it got a big boost in sales, like I mentioned, from being on Big Bang Theory. And It's now on Amazon, and it's basically it's like a female Jason Bourne. She wakes up and she's in this robot body, and she doesn't know how she got there or why she's like that, but everybody's trying to kill her, and she's trying to figure it out. It turns out like high-tech weaponry is kind of like outlawed in the future. Only the very rich can control it, and they, you know, she's a lot of high-tech weaponry, so they're trying to stop her, and they're trying to figure out how she got that way. I don't want to give anything away, but you do find out throughout the series what happened and how that started. And she also finds out she has family that she didn't know about, you know, because she basically died and was reborn as this character, but like a number of years have passed, so, you know, it kind of starts from there. So.
And so, like, again, like the genre would be like action for that primary. Is that what the audience that you would say fit for that?
Yeah, action, sci-fi. Yeah. It does pretty well in Japan, actually. Whenever I go to like a Japanese toy store, like I had, because it's on the back of my phone, and then somebody saw it, he goes, oh, Cyber Girl Leeta. Like, they actually know it in Japan, which kind of surprised me. I did a special Japanese cover too, so yeah.
And yes, is there any other plugs that you have you'd like to?
Not really. Mostly just, like I said, I'm doing my comic books. CyberGirlLeeta.com is where you can get that, and I'm doing a lot of the shows. And I gotta say, it's great because when you're doing comics and animation stuff, it's very like solitary kind of thing. But by doing these shows, which I probably do about 3 or 4 a month, sometimes you get out and you meet the fans, and it's kind of cool that you get a reaction to like if people like what you're doing or not. So it's one of the things I really like about it.
And if someone wanted to come see you at one of these shows, are there any like particular shows you got coming up that you'll be exhibiting?
Well, you can always look on my Instagram, is Jeff Wildstar at Instagram. It's on Instagram, but I always announce them on there. My next show I'm doing is going to be in upstate New York, and I'm also doing a signing up there on December 10th. I'd have to look at my full schedule, but I'm pretty much booked all the time, which is kind of lucky. I'm kind of glad.
Well deserved. Yeah. Well, it's very nice to meet you. I appreciate the conversation.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys, and we'll see you on the next thing.